Okay, so now we're going to have a phase shift and maybe a vertical shift. This one doesn't, my example doesn't have a vertical shift, but we'll talk about it. So basically, find the amplitude. Oops. Find the period. And find the phase shift. All right, and then we'll talk about what to do. Okay, so in example 9 here, the amplitude is 3. It's a sine curve, by the way. So A is 3. The absolute value of A is 3. And then the period is going to be 2 pi over the absolute value of B. Well, in our case then, so I've got my amplitude being 3 in this case, and then the period is going to be 2 pi over 4. So if you invert and multiply, you're going to get 8 for that. I don't know if you can see my pi symbol there, but there. So it's going to have a period of 8. Okay. And then we have to talk about the phase shift. Now remember, the phase shift is C over B. So in our case, the phase shift is going to be pi over 4 over pi over 4, which is going to be 1. So that's just going to have a phase shift of 1. So that's kind of nice. All right. Now we're going to draw, in this case it's a sine curve, so we're going to draw y equals a sine bx. So it's like what we were doing before we thought about phase shift and vertical shift. We're just going to think about the period and the amplitude right now, and that'll give us a base graph, and then we can do the shift based on what we need to shift it, phase shift and vertical shift. Okay, so draw the axes. Again, I'm just going to go over one period, and I know my period is 8, so I just mark it off as 8, cut it in half. That's going to be 4, and then 2, and then 6. You can put those numbers in if you want to. Sometimes it's easier to leave them out because it gives you a little more room. Okay, our amplitude is 3, so we would say it's going up 3, 1, 2, 3, and down 3, 1, 2, 3. And this may not be to scale, but I'm going to be okay with that. All right, now we'll try it in green this time and see if it works better. So I know my sine curve starts at 0, 0. I know it's going to go up at the first increment, that first critical value, which in this case is 2, is going to go all the way up to 3, because normally it'd be a 1, but now it's going to go up to 3 because of the amplitude. I don't have a reflection, so I don't have to worry about that. Then I know I'm going to have a point at 4, 0. I'm going to have a point at 6, negative 3. Again, that's where my normal negative 1 would be, but it's multiplied by 3, so it's down at negative 3. And then right there at 8, 0. This is not the graph, but it's into consideration the period and the period and the amplitude. Okay, and also if there had been a reflection, if it had been a negative 3 for the A, then we would have had to reflect it, but it was a positive 3, so we don't have to do that. Okay, now we're going to take that graph, and the last thing we're going to do is adjust for phase shift and vertical shift. Now you could do it in 2 steps if you want to. This time we don't have a vertical shift, so the vertical shift is D equals 0, so there's no vertical shift this time in our example. But of course you could have a vertical shift, so then we're just saying, okay, scoot it over right or left, scoot it up or down, you know. Okay, we do have a phase shift though, and in our case our phase shift is 1, so C over B is 1. And so we're going to take and shift it to the right 1 unit, okay? So I'm going to draw that in 1 unit. It's like halfway between 0 and 2. And then all of them are going to have to shift that way. So my point that used to be at 0, 0 is now at 1, 0. And my point that used to be at 2, 3 is now at 3, 3. And my point that used to be at 4, 0 is now going to be at 5, 0. And my point that used to be at 6, negative 3, is now going to be at 7, negative 3. Oops. And then my point that was at 8, 0 is now going to be at 9, 0. So everything just shifted 1 unit to the right. That is 1 period, kind of. And it keeps going. You know, you could draw, you know, wherever that comes through next. I don't know, I'd have to count it out. But, you know, that is 1 period. Our graphs aren't going to be beautiful. We're just doing these by hand to understand all the transformations, and we're just going to do our best. So I don't usually ask you to draw more than 2 periods. Sometimes I only ask for 1 period. And so you can see some examples in the book if you want to see more, but I'm interested in you knowing how each of the transformations work, how to graph them with our limited tools that we have. Okay.